Welcome to Shadows at Dusk. Dusk is not the end. It's the doorway between two worlds. A place where stories slip through, quiet, cold, and true. You've entered that space now, and what follows is meant for you. Stay in the shadow. The instant clarity struck, the man adrift in my living room, a phantom in delivery garb. I registered the colossal weight of my error, irrevocable. Outside, the heavens unleashed their fury. The house stood lightless and besieged by the gale, and I, tethered to my own domain, was snared with a stranger whose intentions bore no resemblance to parcel post. It began as merely another Tuesday, draped in gray, homebound, racing a deadline against the clock's relentless tick. I'd listened to the wind's mournful symphony and the rain's percussive assault on the panes. The storm, a slow crescendo throughout the day, had achieved its violent zenith by dusk. Illumination had become a fickle thing, winking in and out for hours. Just as surrender beckoned, a rapping echoed at the threshold. Pause. Who braves such elemental wrath? Then recollection, the package ordered, its digital trail promising arrival this very day. Perhaps some unfortunate courier, swallowed by the tempest. The door swung inward on a figure clad in sodden brown, clutching a box limp with moisture. Evening, he offered, a voice nearly devoured by the wind's roar. Delivery. Might I step inside? Brutal out here. Denials should have been my shield. Every fiber vibrated with a primal urge. Keep the barrier intact. Instruct him to abandon the parcel on the drenched porch. Yet his drenched misery, a portrait of sodden despair, swayed me. I yielded passage. Certainly, I murmured, come in, escape the deluge. He scuttled past, trailing the scent of soaked fabric and something else, indefinable, unsettling. The door clicked shut, muffling the storm's howl. You can leave the package there. I indicated a small table near the entrance. A towel, perhaps? He pivoted, and I saw it, the illumination in his gaze. Not the warmth of gratitude, nor relief from the squall. It was rapacity, predation. My pulse stuttered, a skipped beat in the rhythm of dread. Most generous, he purred, his tone now low, intimate, stripped of the wind's interference. But I suspect a towel won't suffice. A deliberate step forward, an instinctive retreat from me. What are you implying? My voice, a strained filament, fought for steadiness. A smile stretched his lips, devoid of warmth, mirroring the grin of a wolf closing on cornered prey. Oh, I believe you grasp the implication perfectly. And then, oblivion. Light fled the room. One instant, amber warmth. The next, absolute, impenetrable blackness. A low chuckle resonated in the void, tracing icy tendrils down my spine. Well now, he breathed, isn't that opportune? Flight. Pure instinct propelled me, heart hammering against ribs like a trapped bird. My home, even veiled in darkness, was known territory. His it was not, my sole advantage. I plunged into the kitchen's abyss, fingers scrabbling blindly within a drawer, seeking any object that might serve as defense. They closed around the smooth, heavy cylinder of a rolling pin just as his footfalls echoed, crossing the threshold. Now, he crooned, the playfulness sickening. No need for unpleasantness. You and I, we have a long night ahead. Blindly, I swung the wooden implement towards the sound. A dull thud, satisfyingly solid, followed by a sharp grunt. No time to assess damage. Run again. Towards the stairs this time, ascending 2 steps at a stride, one hand ghosting the wall for guidance in the sightless realm. Behind, the sounds of his recovery, his boots heavy on the treads. You'll regret that, he snarled, the veneer of civility shattered. The bedroom sanctuary, slamming the door, fumbling with the lock, a flimsy deterrent, I knew, but perhaps enough for a frantic moment's thought. My gaze swept the room, adjusting to the faint, bruised light filtering through the window. Phone. Where was the phone? Panic erased memory. The door shuddered under his assault. The lock groaned. I lunged for the bedside table, wrenching drawers open. Empty. Another violent slam. Wood splintered. Then the sickening recall, downstairs, plugged into the living room wall. A plummeting sensation in my gut. Trapped, phoneless, dark, a madman battering his way in. The window, the sole egress. I scrambled towards it, flinging it wide. Wind and rain lashed inwards, instantly soaking me. Below, the treacherous slope of the porch roof beckoned, a significant drop to the saturated earth. A broken bone seemed a small price. As I poised to clamber out, lightning split the sky, momentarily bleaching the yard white. There, tucked behind my own car, a dark van, utterly alien, not the vehicle of any delivery service. How long had he watched, waited? The bedroom door imploded, a detonation of wood and force that jolted me. He filled the fractured doorway, a dark silhouette, breath rasping. End of the line, he stated, advancing. My grip tightened on the rolling pin. I retreated until the cool dampness of the windowsill pressed against my spine. Stay away. The words were meant as a warning, though they trembled with fear. He laughed, a jagged, ugly sound. Or you'll tap me with your little pin again? Be my guest. I appreciate a struggle. He lunged. I swung, but anticipation guided him. His hand clamped onto my wrist, twisting with agonizing pressure until the rolling pin clattered away. There now, he hissed, face inches from mine, his breath foul. Let the entertainment begin. In that instant, his fetid breath upon my skin, his grip a vice, something fractured within me. Resilience surged, hot and fierce. Not like this. This would not be my final scene. My knee snapped upwards, connecting with brutal precision. A strangled howl tore from him as he doubled over. Seizing the moment, I shoved with every ounce of strength, sending him staggering back. Without hesitation, I scrambled onto the porch roof. Rain-slicked shingles offered treacherous purchase. I fought for balance. Behind me, curses punctuated his pained recovery, the sound of him nearing the window. A frantic slide, half run down the angled surface, terror a cold knot in my throat. At the precipice, a fractional pause, then the leap into the void. Impact jarred through ankles, knees, but pain was irrelevant. His form appeared at the upper window, poised to follow. I ran. Across the sodden lawn, across the streaming asphalt to the sanctuary of my neighbor's porch. Fists hammered the door, screams ripping from my raw throat. Light bloomed within, movement. As the door cracked open, the shriek of tires sliced through the storm's clamor. I spun. The dark van, fishtailing, vanished into the tempestuous night. Police arrived, their questions a stark counterpoint to the storm's receding rage. They searched, found nothing. The van gone, evidence evaporated. They spoke of luck, of how much worse it might have been, their words hollow platitudes against the enormity of what had transpired. Sleep became an elusive quarry that night, and for countless nights thereafter. His face swam in the darkness behind my eyelids. His voice echoed in the silence. Every creak, every shadow became a potential threat. I abandoned the house, severed the line to my old number, even toyed with erasing my name. Yet the fear remained, a persistent, low hum beneath the surface of daily life. It lingers still, because he is out there, perhaps observing, perhaps awaiting another deluge, another solitary woman, and the chilling certainty persists. Next time, he might not grant his quarry the mercy of escape. So this story unfolds, not merely as a caution, a plea to guard your thresholds, but as testament. We possess reservoirs of strength untapped, even adrift in the deepest dark, hope seemingly extinguished, the courage to retaliate can ignite. And to him, should these words find him, the fear has transmuted. I am prepared, and the next flight into the night will not be mine. It was an echo. The realization struck cold, a shard of ice driven into the marrow. That phantom tread, just offbeat with my own pounding soles. This nocturnal escape had soured into something else entirely, and retreat, already a forgotten luxury. A creature of nocturne, I always found solace when the city exhaled its diurnal clamor, settling into a velvet hush punctuated by distant sirens and the rare, soft call of a hunting owl. My ritual was the midnight run. Streets relinquished their daytime frenzy, the air crisped with autumn's approach, and tonight, a swollen moon bled spectral luminescence onto the pavement, stretching familiar shapes into skeletal distortions. Sneakers laced tight, music pulsing, a shield against the silence. I stepped into the cool embrace of the dark. My accustomed circuit led toward the sprawling green heart of the metropolis, Meridian Park. Overhead, street lamps cast stuttering aureoles, their inconsistent flicker painting the asphalt in strobing flashes that danced at the edge of vision. A familiar urban phantom I'd learned to ignore, tuning instead to the metronome of breath and sneaker strike. Yet crossing the park's threshold tonight, a shift. Not emptiness, but a charged stillness settled, thick and watchful. The usual scattering of late-night wanderers or solitary figures huddled on benches seemed absent, leaving only this palpable weight in the air. Pre-race nerves, I reasoned, the looming marathon tightening its grip on my psyche. Dismissed. Pushing onward, lungs working, I rounded the grand, silent fountain, a dark mirror reflecting the moon's cold eye, and then footfalls. Not mine. A counter rhythm, subtly discordant, trailing my cadence. It's a quick, sharp turn of the head, revealed nothing but moon-washed flagstones and the deep ink of shadows. I slowed, hesitant, a frown etching itself onto my brow. The pursuing rhythm slowed in perfect, unnerving sympathy. My pulse, already a drummer from exertion, hammered a frantic new beat against my ribs. Paranoia, surely. An acoustic trick of the open space, my mind weaving phantoms from fatigue. Yet navigating the next curve of the path, the sound gained substance, grew undeniably present. I halted mid-stride, pivoting on the balls of my feet, braced for confrontation. Emptiness greeted me, the path unfurled behind, a ribbon of pale gray under the moon, utterly deserted. Silence rushed in, amplifying the ragged tear of my own breath, the low thrum of the city sleeping fitfully beyond the trees. Is anyone there? The query emerged then, swallowed by the vast quiet. Only the sigh of wind through drying leaves, the distant punctuation of a dog's bark answered. A tremor ran through me, shaking my head, trying to dispel the rising dread. I forced myself forward. Instantly, the footsteps resumed. Tap, tap, thud, right behind me. Faster now, insistent, closing the gap. Raw panic, cold and sharp, flooded my veins. I bolted, no longer jogging, but sprinting, muscles screaming, pavement blurring beneath hammering feet, aiming desperately for the distant sanctuary of the park gates. The pursuing rhythm matched mine instantly, stride for relentless stride, amplifying with each frantic second. A sideways glance, snatched in terror, and my heart seized. A silhouette, stark against the lunar glow at the periphery of my sight. Indistinct, yet undeniably present, gliding, keeping pace with an unnatural ease that mocked my straining effort. Fire scorched my lungs, legs turned to leaden weights, but the gate loomed closer, the promise of lamplit streets, of potential witnesses. Yet the footsteps clung, an auditory burr, never closer, never farther, a tormenting proximity. A sharp stitch lanced my side, forcing a gasp, a falter. The steps behind surged nearer. I could hear breathing now, a harsh rasp that wasn't mine. Then freedom, bursting through the iron gates onto the sidewalk, almost plowing into a placid couple strolling with their terrier. A choked apology escaped me as I veered past, ignoring their startled query. Are you all right? Already a fleeing shadow down the block. Blind flight followed. Left, right, another left, weaving through the urban labyrinth, praying for a break, a moment's respite. But the footfalls remained, a phantom echo, sometimes receding to a whisper, then abruptly, terrifyingly, snapping loud and close just behind my shoulder. Impulse drove me into a narrow fissure between buildings, a shortcut promising escape, a fatal error. Darkness swallowed the moonlight here, the towering brick walls creating a canyon of shadows. Midway down the suffocating passage, my foot snagged, unseen debris, a carton perhaps, sending me crashing downward. The impact jarred my bones. Rough aggregate tore at my palms, my knees. Winded, stunned, I lay gasping on the cold ground. And then I heard it. The footsteps entering the alley's mouth, slow now, measured, inexorable. Adrenaline surged past the pain. I scrambled upright, ignoring the sting, turning to flee, only to stare in raw horror at the impassable mesh of a chain-link fence sealing the alley's end. Trapped. The steps advanced. I spun, back hitting the cold, unyielding wire. Who are you? The shout was meant to be defiant, but trembled betrayingly. Leave me alone. The police, they're coming. Silence answered, thick and absolute, save for the relentless advance. Closer. My gaze darted wildly, searching the refuse-strewn ground. A length of rusted pipe gleamed dully. I seized it, its cold weight a pathetic comfort, brandishing it like some desperate, cornered animal. Stay back. I swear I'll use this. The footsteps ceased. The sudden quiet stretched taut as wire. Then from the deepest blackness at the alley's entrance, a form coalesced, detaching itself from the shadows. Tall, imposing. My knuckles whitened on the pipe. It glided forward, halting mere yards away. In the gloom, features remained obscured, a humanoid shape carved from night itself. Close enough now to hear its respiration, impossibly steady, utterly unlabored, as if the frantic chase had been nothing. What do you want? My voice frayed, barely a whisper. The silhouette inclined its head, a gesture almost inquisitive, and then it spoke, the sound cutting through the tension, chillingly resonant, disturbingly familiar. It's time to wake up now, Ilara. Confusion warred with terror. What? Wake up, the voice insisted, gentle yet absolute. This is a nightmare, Ilara. The alley walls wavered, losing their solidity, the air shimmering like heat haze. The menacing shape before me dissolved, shrinking, its threatening aura evaporating. A pressure on my shoulder, a gentle rocking. Ilara, sweetheart, wake up. Just a bad dream. My eyes flew open. A strangled gasp tore from my throat as I bulged upright in bed. Julian sat beside me, his familiar face etched with worry, his hand warm on my shoulder. Hey, you okay? He asked softly, his touch grounding. You were crying out, twisted in the sheets. My gaze swept the room, our bedroom, bathed in the soft gray light of dawn, filtering through the blinds. No suffocating alley, no silent pursuer. Just the reassuring solidity of home. A nightmare. I managed, my throat raw. I was running. Something was chasing me. Julian drew me close, a comforting anchor. Shh, it's over, he murmured against my hair. You're safe. It was only a dream. My heartbeat gradually steadied under his embrace. I nodded, exhaling a ragged sigh. Yes, just a dream. As Julian padded off towards the kitchen, the promise of coffee hanging in the air, a residue of fear clung stubbornly. The nightmare's texture remained too sharp, too visceral. The echo of those footfalls resonated, a phantom beat in the quiet room. Slipping from bed, drawn by an unseen current, I moved to the window, parting the blinds. Below, the street stirred with the mundane rhythms of morning. Dog walkers, early runners tracing determined paths, a courier van idling. Ordinary. And yet, for the briefest flicker of an instant, a shape, motionless on the opposite pavement, staring directly up at our window. I blinked, and it vanished. A trick of light, surely. An afterimage burned onto my retina by fear. I let the blind fall shut, forcing the thought away. Imagination, nerves frayed by the dream. But the denial felt thin, because in that fleeting second, the stillness, the posture, it had mirrored the silhouette from the alley. Shaking my head, trying to banish the tendrils of sleep and terror, I repeated the mantra. only a dream, only a dream. Yet walking towards the kitchen, towards Julian and the normalcy of breakfast, a deeper instinct remained alert, straining against the silence, listening for a rhythm that didn't belong, for footsteps just behind my own. Midnight held the house in its palm. Elias stood adrift in the living room, where a single lamp pulled weak amber light against encroaching shadows. He'd extinguished the others, seeking the soft descent into sleep. Outside, the neighborhood slept deeply, a silence profound and absolute, untouched by the usual nocturnal murmurs of traffic or distant voices. It was the kind of quiet Elias usually welcomed, a balm, but tonight it felt thin, stretched taut over something else. Then came the sound, a dull percussion from overhead, insistent yet muffled. A scrape, a soft thud, repeating with unnerving regularity every few seconds. It resonated from the ceiling, specifically from the forgotten territory of the attic. Years had silted over Elias's memory of that space, unused, unneeded. Its square hatch punctuated the far end of the hallway ceiling, looming over the folded stepladder, leaning innocuously against the plaster. Ascending felt alien, pointless. He'd always pictured it a void choked with dust, or simply nothing at all. Yet the sound wouldn't cease. He tried anchoring himself to the couch armrest, waiting it out, reasoning it away, settling pipes, a skittering nocturnal creature. But the noise possessed a cadence, a deliberate structure alien to random house groans. Thud, scrape, pause, thud, scrape, pause. 5 minutes dissolved, and the sound burrowed under his skin. He flicked on the hallway light, its sudden glare harsh. Tilting his head back, he confronted the small, pale square of the attic hatch. A stool became his pedestal. Reaching up, he pushed. Resistance. The panel, sealed by a fine membrane of old paint, yielded grudgingly. A hard shove broke the seal, lifting the wooden square inward. A descending breath of air, thick with the scent of dormant dust and dry decay, met him. It was stale, ancient air that pricked his eyes, forcing a small cough he muffled with the back of his hand. A light. He needed a light. Retreating to his closet, he retrieved the compact LED torch kept for blackouts, its batteries fresh. A test click unleashed a potent, clean beam. From a kitchen drawer, he unearthed a dust mask, the attic's arid perfume still clinging to his throat. An old canvas jacket and sturdy work gloves followed, precautions against the unknown. Returning to the hatch, he mounted the stool again, poked the torch, and then his head through the opening. The flashlight's beam sliced through an unexpectedly cavernous dark, wider, taller than he'd ever imagined. This wasn't some cramped crawl space. It possessed a genuine volume. Aged floorboards, striated with cracks and gaps, stretched before him. No clutter, no stacked boxes, at least not immediately visible. He hoisted himself up, testing the boards gingerly with his weight. They held. Sweeping the light in a slow arc revealed skeletal wooden shelves lining the perimeter walls, utterly bare. Not a single object rested upon their pale, worn surfaces, the wood grain smooth in places, as though scoured by time or something else. Then, in a far corner, he saw them, masks, resting against the wall, lined up on the floorboards, 3 of them. They appeared handmade, carved from wood, yet strangely featureless, smooth, rounded contours where eyes should have been, only rudimentary slits suggesting mouths. Their texture looked coarse, unrefined. The lack of eye holes gave them a profoundly blank, unsettling aspect. Elias moved closer, the torchlight playing over their surfaces, seeking detail. They smelled faintly of old wood and the pervasive dust. No windows pierced the attic walls. His torch provided the only focused illumination, yet the space wasn't entirely pitch black. A peculiar, diffuse luminescence seemed to emanate from the very air, strongest near the attic's center, as if moonlight bled through invisible fissures in the roof. He aimed his beam upwards, solid rafters, solid roof decking. No skylights, no vents. Yet a faint, silvery sheen lay across sections of the floor, inexplicable. The house was old, yes, but the roof was sound. Moonlight had no business being here. Still, it persisted, a ghostly underlight that rendered some shapes visible without the torch. The rhythmic sound had vanished. Silence pressed in, but it was a different quality of silence now, expectant. Elias listened, straining. The tapping was gone, replaced by a faint, dry rustling, like stiff fabric being dragged across wood, and then whispering. It coiled from behind one of the distant, empty shelves. Indistinct at first, a low, sibilant murmur. He moved with deliberate slowness, his boots careful on the creaking boards. Closer now, the sound resolved into voices. Multiple voices, hushed, overlapping, speaking in rapid, confidential tones. Words blurred, but then sharp and clear amidst the mumble. He heard his name, Elias. They were discussing him. He froze, a cold fist clenching around his heart. His palms grew damp inside the gloves. He swung the flashlight beam towards the source of the voices, but the space behind the shelf remained empty. Bare wall, dusty floor. Yet the whispering persisted, undulating. His name again, spoken in different cadences. One voice deep, drawing it out with peculiar care. Another sharp, urgent. What could he say? Silence seemed the only shield. He saw nothing move, yet the atmosphere thickened, the pressure changing as if the air itself held its breath. His own breathing grew shallow, rapid. A primal urge to flee warred with a desperate curiosity. He took a hesitant step back. A floorboard groaned loudly under his weight. The whispering instantly ceased, then surged back, louder, more distinct. He caught fragments. Shouldn't have. He's here. Came up. They seemed to be arguing. One voice urged quiet. Another insisted on his presence. Driven by a need to locate the source, Elias began to cautiously circumnavigate the space, torch beam probing ahead. He checked behind every shelf, peered into every dusty recess. No wires, no speakers, no hidden vents, only void and shadow. His gaze drifted back to the masks. Something was wrong. Their alignment had shifted. He distinctly remembered them side by side, facing outward. Now the central mask was canted slightly, turned towards its neighbor on the right. He knelt, focusing the light. Reaching out, his gloved fingers brushed the wood. Cool, dry. Had a draft disturbed it? Impossible. The air was preternaturally still, heavy, yet possessed a disturbing quality. It felt as though it might be breathing. He sensed it more than heard it. A subtle, almost imperceptible rise and fall beneath his feet, the floorboards seeming to flex minutely, rhythmically. A faint vibration traveled through the soles of his boots. He steadied himself, pressing a hand flat against the wood. Solid, yet imbued with this unsettling, vital motion. Disquiet coiled in his gut. A sharp scraping noise erupted behind him. Elias spun, brandishing the flashlight like a warding stave. There, huddled low in a far corner, almost merging with the gloom, was a shape. Darker than the surrounding shadows, hunched and immobile. Humanoid, perhaps, but indistinct. Veiled. He strained to see details, finding none. It remained utterly still, utterly silent. His throat constricted. Should he speak? Before the thought could form into words, more whispering bloomed from a different corner. He jerked his head, the light following. Another shape, identically crouched. Realization dawned cold and sharp. There were several. Positioned in the junctions where walls met floor, pressed low, their forms blurred by the strange ambient light. He counted 3, possibly 4. None advanced. They simply occupied their corners, watching. The whispering ebbed and flowed, a constant sibilant tide. His name surfaced again, woven into their hidden conversation. "Who are you?" The words ripped from his tight throat, sounding unnaturally loud in the charged stillness. The whispering continued unabated, a collective murmur that offered no reply, only oblique references among themselves. Their voices, though human-timbered, issued from unseen mouths, behind unseen faces. The urge to escape became overwhelming. He took a step towards where the hatch should be, then scanned the floor and ceiling junction. Nothing. The square opening, the faint outline of the hallway below, gone. He swept the torch beam frantically. Where he descended, there was now only seamless floorboard meeting solid wall. Panic flared, hot and sharp. His breath hitched, heart hammering against his ribs. Sweat beaded on his forehead, trickled down his back. "Calm down," he commanded himself, the order dissolving in the rising tide of fear. He retraced his steps, moving back towards the shelves, floorboards groaning their protest with each footfall. He ran his gloved hand along the wall where the entrance had been. Firm, solid wood. He pressed his ear against it, straining for any sound from the house below. The refrigerators drone, the hall clocks tick. Silence. Only the omnipresent whispering and that faint, dry rustling. Trapped, he forced himself to think. Methodically, he began to check each corner, torch held rigidly before him. As he approached the first crouched shape, it seemed to dissolve, receding into the deeper darkness without a discernible movement, simply flowing away from the light. He reached the corner, empty, save for swirling dust motes that made him sneeze, eyes stinging. He moved to the next corner. The shape there performed the same silent retreat. He tried to catch one in the beam, but they were too fluid, too quicksilver. Empty space greeted him again, yet he could hear them, always just behind him now, their whispers a constant shifting presence. He tried speaking again, stating his name, asserting his residence below, demanding their purpose. The voices merely continued their internal debate, stretching his name into strange configurations, arguing his right to be there, his belonging there. Contradictions tangled in the air. His jaw tightened, his grip on the flashlight becoming painfully fierce. His fingers trembled. He turned his attention back to the masks, a tangible focal point. He approached them again. Now all three were turned inward, their blank faces seemingly contemplating each other. Kneeling, he picked one up, turning it over. The back was covered in scratch marks, shallow, random grooves etched into the wood. He traced them with a gloved finger. They felt fresh. He carefully replaced the mask. As he did, the floor beneath his knees felt oddly yielding, like damp wood, though it remained dry to the touch. It held his weight, but he sensed a precarious softness, a potential give he dared not test. Taking a deep, ragged breath, he sought escape again. Standing tall, he made a slow circle, bathing every surface in light. The attic remained stubbornly consistent. Empty shelves, floor-bound masks, shadowed corners, and the whispers a ceaseless commentary, sometimes overlapping into a dense susurrus, sometimes punctuated by the phantom sound of footsteps just behind him, always revealing nothing when he spun around. He tested the walls, pushing against a shelf. It creaked but held fast. He knelt, trying to pry up a floorboard, immovable. He knocked on the plaster, listening. The whispering intensified with each attempt, as if warning him off. Minutes bled away. Then a flicker of movement overhead. A subtle shift in the ceiling boards directly above, a hairline crack appearing. Through it, a fragile sliver of genuine moonlight pierced the gloom. He stared, hope flickering. Where did it lead? He positioned himself beneath the faint beam, looking up. No hatch, no window, but the wood seemed thinner here, less substantial. Reaching up, he pressed a hand against it. The board felt strangely pliable, almost yielding. He pushed harder. A distinct crack sounded, and the whispering swelled, agitated, voices sharp with displeasure. His name spat out now, louder, accusatory. He wouldn't stop. He needed out. Shoving the flashlight into his mouth, beam pointing upwards, he attacked the weakened spot with both hands, pulling, pushing, fingers scrabbling at the rough edges. Dust rained down, coating him, stinging his eyes. His arms screamed with effort. The whispering escalated into a low, collective hiss. He heard skittering sounds from the corners behind him, but refused to look back. Finally, a small board splintered free. A rush of cool, clean air, the scent of the night outside, damp earth and foliage, washed over him. Elation surged. He worked frantically, tearing at the edges, ignoring the pain in his fingertips. Another board gave way. He spat the flashlight back into his hand, revealing a narrow opening into blackness, but a different, more mundane darkness. He reached up, found purchase, and hauled himself upwards. The hissing voices crescendoed, then abruptly cut off. As he pulled his torso through the gap, something intangible brushed against his dangling leg. He kicked out instinctively, connecting only with empty air. Wriggling, scrambling, he propelled himself into the space above, not knowing where it led, only that it was away. He found himself in a cramped, low crawl space between ceiling and roof, navigating insulation and wooden joists. Normal construction. This felt right. He crawled carefully along the beams, torchlight revealing familiar territory. A few feet further, another opening beckoned, downward. Peering through, he recognized the top shelf of his own bedroom closet. Relief washed over him. He lowered his legs, finding purchase, and dropped onto the welcome softness of carpet. The faint scent of his laundry detergent filled his nostrils. He turned, heart still thudding violently, and looked up. The closet ceiling was intact. A single board looked slightly loose, perhaps, but there was no gaping hole, no passage to the strange attic he'd just fled. He reached up, touched the wood, solid, nailed firmly in place. He stood there for a long moment, catching his breath, clothes filmed in gray dust, hands shaking. He switched off the flashlight. The house was blessedly, normally quiet. The refrigerator hummed its low song. The hallway clock ticked softly. No whispers. Emerging from the closet, he checked the hallway. The attic hatch was shut tight, exactly as it always was. He reached up, touched its painted surface, stiff, ordinary wood. He stood beneath it for a long time, breathing deliberately, feeling the frantic rhythm in his chest gradually subside. What had happened up there? His dusty gloves, the stale scent clinging to them, were tangible proof. He went to the bathroom, scrubbing his hands, watching the fine gray residue swirl down the drain. Back in the hallway, everything appeared aggressively normal. He turned on more lights, bathing the familiar rooms in brightness, checking, searching. Nothing amiss. The sound never returned. The attic remained sealed, its silence absolute once more. Elias never tried the hatch again. He spent the remainder of that night wide awake, cocooned in the brightly lit living room, listening intently to the mundane symphony of his house. No voices, no shifting shapes. It felt like his house again, yet the memory remained, vivid and visceral. The vast emptiness, the blind wooden stares of the masks, the sibilant whispers weaving his name, the knots of shadow in the corners. He remembered the ice of panic, the sweat, the straining muscles, the breath catching in his throat when the way back vanished. He remembered its undeniable reality. That was all he could claim. No answers arrived, no explanations offered themselves. He knew only that he had gone up there, into that other space, and somehow impossibly returned. Nothing followed, nothing changed. The attic stayed quiet. He never went back. He tells himself it was a waking dream, a hallucination born of solitude and silence. But the dust on his clothes had been real, and the fear remains, a cold ember that glows whenever his gaze drifts towards the ceiling. The wrongness announced itself the instant Elias turned the key. A potent draft, incongruous with the still evening air, slammed into his chest as the barn door groaned open. Within, the atmosphere felt viscous, a tangible weight that constricted his lungs and sent prickles skittering across his skin. He detected the scent of scorched tallow mingled with an acrid bitterness that clawed at the back of his throat. His flashlight sliced a trembling beam through the gloom, illuminating walls slick with an unnatural dampness. Beneath his boots, the earthen floor yielded, preserving his intrusion. And there, tucked away in the farthest corner, Obscured by haphazard stacks of timber and a skeletal, rust-eaten wheelbarrow, stood the altar. A knot tightened low in his belly. Upon it, candles burned, defiant flames flickering in the sealed, abandoned space. He'd acquired this parcel of rural quietude mere weeks prior, seeking solace and finding affordability. The farmhouse, while needing a restorative hand, seemed sound. The agent had waved vaguely towards the outbuilding, suggesting it as storage, perhaps a future workshop. Nothing prepared him for this. During the perfunctory inspection, his gaze had swept over straw-littered floors and sturdy-looking rafters, noting no obvious decay or ingress. He hadn't registered the altar then. Perhaps it lay buried beneath the accumulated detritus, or perhaps his attention had simply faltered. Now, on this inaugural night of genuine exploration, Elias stood transfixed, gazing at the unsteady ballet of light. The candles formed a crude circlet. Nestled at its heart rested a small wooden bowl brimming with some opaque dark fluid that exuded a sour miasma. Around it, dried herbs lay scattered like forgotten runes. The sharp, pungent odor pierced the damp air, weaving a tapestry of profound disquiet. Only the faint, insistent crackle of burning wicks disturbed the silence, the flame tips swaying in hypnotic synchronicity. Drawn forward against his better judgment, Elias sought a closer look at the makeshift table, a rough plank crudely affixed to two squat logs. Wax drippings stained its surface, pooling in solidified lumps around the candle bases. He cautiously touched the wood. It felt strangely warm, imbued with the heat of a persistent, contained fire. A perplexing question arose. How did these candles endure, defying consumption? Some appeared nearly pristine, others significantly diminished. As he reached towards a half-melted taper, a bead of molten wax spat onto his hand. The sharp sting made him recoil, a curse escaping his lips as he smeared the offending wax onto his jeans. Decision made, he moved to extinguish the flames. Pinching the first wick between dampened fingers, he winced as heat seeped through. One by one, he snuffed them out, plunging the barn into near total darkness, save for his flashlight's solitary eye. Immediately, a profound chill settled onto his skin as the last flame died. The acrid perfume of smoke and bitter herbs clung tenaciously to his clothes. He grasped the door handle, stepped back into the night, and secured the lock behind him. Standing in the yard, the cool air a stark contrast on his face, his heart hammered against his ribs. Rational explanations warred within him. Squatters, vestiges of the previous owner's esoteric practices. Uncertainty gnawed. A circuit of the property revealed no trespassers' marks near the barn, no compromised windows. The lock remained inviolate, yielding only to his key. Sleep offered little refuge that night. His mind, a relentless projector, replayed images of those spectral flames dancing in the oppressive dark. Each time his eyelids fluttered shut, the wooden bowl materialized, the scattered herbs forming cryptic patterns in his mind's eye. He startled awake multiple times, convinced of rustling sounds in the hallway, only to find the house utterly still and empty. Morning arrived, radiant and clear. Elias resolved to inspect the barn under the unambiguous light of day. Sunlight glinted off the dew-kissed grass as he crossed the yard, his boots leaving dark impressions on the wet blades, his own tracks from the night before, starkly solitary. No other prints marred the approach. He produced the key, the lock turned, the door swung inward. The smell assaulted him anew, potent as ever. Impossibly the candles were ablaze, every single one, fresh runnels of wax glistening down their sides. The air inside was stifling, humid, like a long-sealed steam room. His pulse galloped, his throat felt parched. A frantic scan confirmed the structure's integrity. No forced entry, no disturbed dust on the sills, no alien tracks upon the floor. His gaze drifted to the walls, which seemed to weep, glistening with beads of moisture. Tiny rivulets traced paths down the aged wood. Faint, ethereal wisps of vapor curled upwards in places, dissipating near the high beams. Retrieving the flashlight from his pocket, he swept its beam into the corners. Dampness prevailed, a fine patina of rust-coated nails and hinges. Cobwebs festooned the rafters, yet conspicuously absent were their spinners. He advanced towards the altar, his legs feeling strangely insubstantial. The candles hissed softly, their flames seeming to quiver, acknowledging his approach. Gooseflesh prickled his arms. His own heartbeat thudded, loud in the enclosed space. With deliberate effort, he reached down, pinching out the flames methodically. As the last wick succumbed, a more intense wave of the bitter herbal scent surged forth, stinging his eyes, triggering a cough. Once again, the barn grew colder, his breath pluming visibly in the air. Leaving the barn secured behind him, Elias returned to the house, determined to unravel this enigma. He sifted through boxes left by the former occupant, old bills, faded letters, tattered local event flyers from bygone years. Nothing shed light on the barn's secret life. His call to the real estate agent went to voicemail. He left a message inquiring about the barn's history. A trip into town seemed necessary for supplies, heavy-duty gloves, refuse sacks, perhaps additional locks. At the hardware store, the clerk met his tentative questions about odd finds in old barns with a nonchalant shrug. People had peculiar hobbies, stored all sorts of strange things, he offered. He recommended a potent mildew cleaner and suggested a dehumidifier for the dampness. Elias purchased his items, thanked the man, and drove back towards the property. Late afternoon sunlight filtered through gathering clouds as he arrived. Rain threatened. He deposited the supplies in the house before making straight for the barn, his hand trembling slightly as he fitted the key. The moment the door opened, the sight stopped him cold. The candles, resurrected once more, burned brightly, mocking his earlier efforts. His jaw tightened, nausea churned within him. The familiar, acrid blend of wax and herbs stung his eyes. The floor felt stickier now, the walls weeping more profusely. He hung a newly acquired lantern from a hook near the entrance, banishing the oppressive shadows, needing clarity. He turned to the altar. The flames held steady. He scrutinized the wooden bowl. The dark liquid within seemed thicker, fragments of herbs swirling listlessly on its surface. Condensation beaded its rim. The smell was sharper, more penetrating. Water? Oil? Something else entirely? Speculation offered no solace. Pulling on the thick work gloves, he began the grim task anew. One by one, he seized the candles, dropping them into a metal pail. He doused them thoroughly with water, ensuring their extinguishment. Lifting the wooden bowl proved it heavier than anticipated. The liquid sloshed, splattering dark droplets onto the dirt floor. He carried it outside, emptying its contents behind the barn, the foul odor clinging stubbornly. After rinsing the bowl with bottled water, he set it aside near a pile of wood scraps. Back inside, the lantern cast long, dancing shadows. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the chill. His eyes darted nervously towards the corners, the rafters, anticipating something. A tightness gripped his throat. His heartbeat hammered in his ears. He began tearing down stray bits of fabric, desiccated leaves, anything that seemed remotely suspicious. He cleared the makeshift table, stuffing everything, herbs, candle remnants, waxen lumps, into a large trash bag. Nothing would remain to invite this recurrence. Suddenly, a rush of frigid air swept past him. He dropped the bag, spinning around, muscles tensed. Nothing. The barn stood hushed, save for the ragged sound of his own breathing. He forced himself onward, setting the bag near the door. He attacked the table with the cleaning solution, scrubbing away the waxy residue, though the pervasive odor remained. The fumes eventually drove him out. He locked the barn, heaved the trash bag into the bed of his truck, and circled the building's exterior once more. From the outside, it appeared benign. Old wood, weathered but sound. No hidden portals, no apertures large enough for entry. Solid, just as it had seemed initially. He paused, listening intently. Only the sighing wind in the trees answered. Dusk bled across the sky, painting it a somber gray. Inside the house, he attempted to eat. Appetite had fled, but he forced down a sandwich. His hands were unsteady as he poured a glass of water, his mouth persistently dry. He found himself repeatedly glancing out windows, half expecting a lurking figure. Nothing stirred. He told himself it was done. The candles destroyed, the bowl emptied, the space cleared. It had to be fine now. Flipping through an old magazine offered little distraction. His thoughts inevitably circled back to the barn, to the glistening walls and the swirling contents of that bowl. The notion of an all-night vigil warred with profound exhaustion. Finally, he succumbed, leaving a hallway lamp burning as a feeble ward against the dark before dragging himself to bed. Sleep was a tormented landscape of scuffing footsteps on the barn floor, the imagined strike of a match, the sharp hiss of wick catching flame. He awoke near dawn, drenched in cold sweat. The house remained silent, yet his nerves screamed. Fingers twitching, he pulled on his boots, grabbed the flashlight, and added a heavy crowbar to his arsenal before stepping out into the pallid pre-dawn light. His breath misted in the cool air. He trudged through the dew, pausing at the barn door, heart thundering against his ribs, a familiar tightness seizing his chest. He unlocked it, swung it wide. The olfactory assault, burnt wax, bitter herbs, struck him like a physical blow. There, on the altar, the candles stood sentinel, all aflame, arranged in their defiant circle. He froze, knuckles whitening on the crowbar's shaft. The wooden bowl sat in its accustomed place, refilled with the dark liquid. It was as if his efforts had been nothing more than a dream. The table bore its waxy stains. Fresh drippings clung to the candles. Moisture on the walls was heavier now, coalescing into actual droplets, while dense vapor drifted near the ceiling. Panic, metallic and sharp, flooded his mouth. The barn pulsed with a dreadful, inexplicable vitality. His vision swam with stupefaction. His body felt feverish despite the morning chill. He forced a step inside. The earthen floor squelched beneath his boots, saturated. He could hear the distinct trickle of water down the walls. His chest constricted. Focus, he commanded himself. Remove it all again. Yet a chilling certainty settled upon him. It wouldn't matter. The flames danced, mocking his futility, eternal and unquenchable. His mind scrambled for reason, finding none. Clutching the crowbar, thoughts reeling, he struggled to regulate his breathing. He stood there, wrestling with the impulse to simply smash the altar to pieces. A wave of vertigo washed over him. His pulse hammered in his ears. A creeping sentience emanated from the space, a palpable sense that the barn was observing him, waiting. His gaze locked onto the candles. They flickered, hissed. His limbs felt ponderous, leaden. He registered the trembling in his own body, the unsteadiness in his knees. A bead of sweat traced a path down his temple, sting in his eye. He blinked fiercely. Another step forward, his boots sinking slightly into the mud. The crowbar felt like an extension of his own rigid arm. The bitter perfume of the herbs saturated his lungs. He thought of the locked doors, the empty yard, the utter absence of any explanation. The barn felt hermetically sealed, a pocket universe operating under its own perverse laws. Swallowing hard against the rising bile, he lifted the crowbar, preparing to bring it down upon the cursed table. Muscles coiled, his heart thundered. In that instant, the truth crystallized. There was no walking away. Something resided here, and it would not be evicted. He stared at the flames, feeling their image sear into his retinas, and drew a deep, ragged breath. Then, steeling himself, he raised the crowbar higher, resolved to shatter whatever entity fed those ceaseless fires. The night train, a conveyance Ilara boarded only from dire necessity. Its passage felt less like travel and more like being swallowed whole, the world outside a fluid smear of umbra against the glass, while the carriage rattled its monotonous complaint into the void. But tonight, obligation dictated the route. Home beckoned, and this midnight vessel was the sole passage. It will be unremarkable, she assured herself. A swift, solitary glide through the dark. A prediction spectacularly, irrevocably flawed. She embarked late, the day having bled her energies dry. The station exhaled desertion. Only the low thrum of distant mechanisms and the solitary echo of unseen footfalls disturbed the quiet. Locating her assigned seat, Ilara sank into the worn plush, acutely aware of the carriage's profound emptiness. A sparse scattering of souls punctuated the length of the train, islands of humanity adrift in a sea of vacant seats. This vacancy, which ought to have soothed, instead amplified the silence until it pressed upon the ears. With a groan of metal, the journey commenced. The soft vibration beneath her feet offered a fleeting comfort. Ilara leaned her head back, seeking solace, the rhythmic clack-clack of wheels on steel, a hypnotic metronome, lulling her towards exhaustion's edge. beyond the window, darkness reigned absolute, save for the occasional phantom glimmer of a remote farmhouse or a street lamp's lonely sentinel beam. Her eyelids grew heavy, observing this fleeting, lightless theater. Then, sometime near the cusp of midnight, it began. The sound that fractured the mundane. Faint initially, a mere whisper beneath the train's drone, a soft, rhythmic insistence like knuckles rapping gently upon timber. From elsewhere in the car, surely, Ilara reasoned, another passenger stirring. Yet as minutes unspooled, the sound intensified, acquired deliberation. And its origin wasn't the carriage interior. It emanated from the wall, mere inches from her shoulder. Slowly, a prickle tracing her spine, she turned. The adjacent seat gaped empty. Behind her, likewise void. Nothing but the carriage wall, trembling faintly with the train's motion. Still, the tapping persisted, a steady, measured beat, tap, tap, tap. A breath of silence, tap, tap, tap. Again and again, a question posed in percussion, awaiting reply. Her heart commenced a frantic drumming against her ribs. Logic dictated emptiness beyond that partition, nothing but rushing air, shearing metal, the vast, indifferent night. She fought to dismiss it, blaming fatigue, some loose panel vibrating sympathetically with the tracks. But the sound refused dismissal. It swelled. Ilara scanned the car, desperate for a shared glance, a flicker of recognition in another passenger's eyes. Futile. The few others remained entombed in their own worlds, slumbering or hypnotized by the cold glow of handheld screens, utterly deaf to the insistent rhythm filling Ilara's skull. Tap, 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 relentless. Tap, tap, tap. It echoed, burrowed, intolerable. She surged to her feet, propelled into the aisle by a desperate need for distance. The instant her shoes touched the narrow carpet, the tapping ceased. Silence slammed down, absolute and startling. Ilara stood frozen, listening, anticipating its return. Only the train's low hum and the faint rustle of distant fabric answered. A ragged breath escaped her lips. She willed her pulse to steady. Perhaps it had been mechanical. Perhaps exhaustion had frayed her nerves thin. She glanced back towards her seat, half convinced the sound would resume, but only quietude resided there. A walk, then, to clear her head, stretch cramped limbs, dissipate the strange, clinging tension. She moved towards the front of the train, traversing the sparsely populated car into the next. The further she progressed, the more profound the silence became. The low murmur of hypothetical conversations faded entirely, leaving only the wheel's cadence and the occasional groan of the train's metal skeleton. The subsequent car greeted her with utter vacancy, unoccupied. The overhead lights pulsed weakly, painting long, distorted shadows across rows of empty seats. A tremor of unease, cold and sharp, traced its way up her neck. This stark emptiness felt fundamentally wrong, a space she had inadvertently trespassed upon, yet propelled by a force she couldn't name, curiosity perhaps, or something more primal, she pressed onward. 2 more cars yielded the same tableau, silent, abandoned. The quiet thickened, grew viscous, as if the train itself held its breath. The urge to retreat warred with the compulsion to continue. It was then she registered the footsteps, faint yet unmistakable, originating from the carriage just ahead. Unhurried, deliberate steps, pacing just beyond her sightline. Ilara quickened her stride, her heart now a frantic bird against her ribs. The footsteps persisted, maintaining their distance, a phantom just out of reach. Reaching the connecting door, she wrenched it open, stepping through with urgent haste. The car lay empty, devoid of presence, only the familiar flickering lights and the silent congregation of seats. The footsteps vanished. She stood immobilized, mind scrambling for purchase on the cliff face of logic. A passenger slipped through just moments before, an acoustic trick of the moving train. Deep within, however, a certainty resonated. This train was aberrant. Something fundamental was skewed. Turning, intending retreat, the lights in her current car flickered violently, then extinguished. Total darkness descended. Her breath hitched. She froze, suspended in the sudden pitch black, the train's motions a constant rumble beneath. Waiting for the light's return proved fruitless. Instead, the air turned frigid, the silence deepening into something suffocating. And then, the voice, soft as dust, a rasping whisper that materialized directly behind her, far too close. "Why are you here?" Ilara spun, heart hammering, finding only impenetrable black. The car remained empty, the darkness a palpable entity pressing in. She stumbled back a step, pulse roaring in her ears. Run! Her instincts screamed, but her feet felt leaden, anchored to the floor. "Why are you here?" the voice insisted, louder now, frayed edges hardening. Retreating slowly, hands trembling, she groped blindly for the door behind her. The air felt heavy, cloying, stealing her breath. The handle, cold metal under her fumbling fingers. As she grasped it, the voice resonated again, amplified, echoing through the void. "Why are you here?" She tore the door open, collapsing back into the adjacent car. Here, the lights, though flickering, held. She didn't hesitate. She fled. Back through the echoing empty cars, propelled by pure, visceral terror, breath tearing raggedly in her throat. She didn't stop, didn't dare look back, until she regained her own car, collapsing into her seat, struggling to regain control. Around her, the train remained an island of oblivious calm. The other passengers, undisturbed, as if nothing had transpired. But Ilara knew. She knew the cold, the voice, the presence. For the duration of the journey, she remained welded to her seat, gaze locked on the window, watching the dark world hemorrhage past in an unending stream, motionless, sleepless. She merely endured, marking time until the train's velocity finally bled away, groaning into the familiar lights of her destination. Stepping onto the platform felt like surfacing, the station air blessedly light, blessedly mundane. Yet as she walked away from the hulking metal beast, an unshakable conviction trailed her that something unseen, unfelt by others, had disembarked with her. The night train remains a passage untaken, a memory that still whispers in the deepest hours. The asphalt ribbon unfurled into an abyss, a monotonous gray line swallowed by the starless enormity of night. Ilias drove, solitary, cocooned within the humming shell of his sedan. Miles dissolved behind him on this desolate artery, flanked by skeletal fields and the ghosts of forgotten shacks. No moon presided, no companion headlights approached or receded. Only his low beams sliced the darkness, clinging dutifully to the center stripe, a frail guide against the fatigue tugging at his focus. He wasn't drowsy, not exactly, but a bone-deep weariness yearned for the oblivion of his bed. Then, a disruption in the void, a shape on the right shoulder walking. A man, draped in somber cloth, his back turned squarely toward the oncoming lights. Thin, slightly stooped, moving with a peculiar, deliberate slowness. Elias registered the stiffness in his posture, a flicker of concern, stranded perhaps, guttered quickly. Out here, leagues from anywhere resembling civilization, nocturnal pedestrians weren't commonplace. They were omens. Prudence dictated distance. It wasn't his affair. He maintained his speed, perhaps 40 miles per hour, gliding past. The figure's pace seemed unnaturally languid against the car's motion. A fleeting glance caught short, dark hair above a pale nape, nothing more definitive. The man offered no acknowledgement, no turn of the head, merely persisted in his solitary earthbound trajectory. Elias shrugged inwardly, the engine's drone reclaiming the silence. Mere moments later, a prickle of unease. Ahead, bathed in the cone of his headlights, another figure materialized on the shoulder. As the distance closed, Elias's stomach constricted. The same silhouette, the identical posture, the same unhurried gait. Dark clothes, the slight hunch suggesting weariness. Logic rebelled. He'd left the first man nearly a mile back. No intersecting roads, no conceivable shortcuts through the barren landscape offered explanation. How? A dryness crept into his throat. He swallowed, knuckles white on the steering wheel, foot steady on the accelerator. Drawing level this time, he eased off the gas slightly, cracking the window an inch, straining to catch any sound above the engine's thrum. Silence. Only the man's relentless, forward motion. He noted threadbare trousers, a flimsy jacket inadequate for the night air. His shoes, scuffed and coated in dust, spoke of a long pilgrimage, yet no sheen of sweat, no ragged breath betrayed exertion. Still, the face remained averted, just the back of the head, the dark hair, the jacket's worn fabric. Elias accelerated, pushing past 50, eyes darting to the rearview mirror. Emptiness stared back. The flanking fields remained inert. He fumbled at the radio, seeking solace in sound, but only static hissed from the speakers. He silenced it, the engine's hum amplifying the frantic tattoo of his own heart. A bead of sweat traced his temple, though the air held no warmth. Rationality scrabbled for purchase. A trick of the mind, two separate individuals, uncannily similar, traversing this forsaken stretch. Coincidence strained credulity. He commanded himself to calm, to focus purely on the mechanics of driving. But minutes later, the inevitable reappeared. Same form, same cadence, waiting patiently on the roadside canvas ahead. Elias jammed the brakes, the car slowing to a hesitant crawl. A leaden weight settled in his gut. His breathing grew shallow. Retreat beckoned. Turn around, flee back towards the last town, miles behind. But the next town forward lay even further distant. He was trapped on this ribbon of paradox, tethered to this inexplicable revenant. This time, He halted, leaving 20 feet of buffer space, engine idling, hazard lights pulsing like a nervous tick, hoping to provoke a reaction. He leaned out, his voice emerging thin and reedy. "Hey." Silence answered. The figure walked on, shoulders barely articulating the motion. Elias pushed the door open, his legs feeling unnervingly heavy, his hands trembling slightly. Gravel crunched underfoot as he stepped onto the shoulder, the air thick with the scent of dust. "Hey man, what's going on?" Louder now, but equally futile. He advanced, the pounding in his chest echoing the silence outside, 6 feet away. The slow, steady rhythm continued. He could see the jacket now, frayed near the hem, a small tear marking the right shoulder. The hair short and neat, yet unkempt. "Dude, can you hear me?" He reached out instinctively, then hesitated, a profound reluctance freezing his arm, a chill blooming in his chest. Instead, he retreated a step, circling, trying to flank the figure, to steal a glimpse of the hidden face. But with uncanny fluidity, the man seemed to subtly angle away, always presenting the back or the barest, uninformative profile. Elias stumbled backward, eyes locked on the retreating form, scrambled into the car, slammed the locks. He sat, breathing raggedly, watching the man continue his inexorable journey into the gloom ahead. What recourse remained? No cell signal fractured this isolation. Drive on, he told himself. Treat it as phantasmagoria. Pass him again. Keep driving. Maybe distance would finally break the spell. He eased back onto the asphalt, overtaking the figure once more, resolutely fixing his gaze forward. The familiar hum of tires on pavement, the enclosed safety of the cabin, the headlights boring into the vacant road ahead. These were anchors. He risked a glance in the rearview mirror. The figure dwindled, absorbed by the darkness. Relief, fragile and fleeting. 10 minutes crawled by, his jaw locked, ahead, again. The same jacket, the same weary posture, the same funereal pace. "Impossible," Elias whispered, the sound unnaturally loud in the confined space. He slammed the brakes, stopping dead center on the asphalt. He killed the engine. Absolute silence descended, profound and terrifying. The figure, now 50 feet ahead, became a mere suggestion in the ambient dark. He flicked the headlights back on. The man solidified, still walking. Panic surged, a cold wave washing through him. His hands shook violently now. Dampness slicked his forehead. Deep breaths did little to steady him. Turn back. The thought solidified into resolve. Even if it meant hours added to the journey, backtracking felt safer than pressing forward into this recurring nightmare. He reversed carefully, executed a tight U-turn, the headlights sweeping across the desolate expanse. Facing the opposite direction, he pressed the accelerator, a measure of calm returning with the reversed trajectory. The road unwound behind him, identical in its bleakness. 5 minutes passed. Then the fragile hope shattered. Far ahead, caught in the headlight beams, the figure, walking on the shoulder, walking away from him, yet somehow still ahead, blocking his retreat as surely as he blocked the path forward. He stomped the brakes, tires screeching in protest. A curse escaped his lips, bitten off. A scream built in his throat, but he choked it down. Slowly, he crept forward. The figure remained oblivious, locked in its loop. This time, Elias leaned on the horn, a strident desperate blast tearing through the stillness. No reaction. He held it down, the sound reverberating inside the car, assaulting his own ears, a futile sonic assault on the indifferent night. The figure walked on. He released the horn, his heart hammering against his ribs, breath catching in his dry throat. Getting out again felt unthinkable. Fear coiled in his stomach, a physical tightness seizing his limbs. His head throbbed, palms slicked the steering wheel. A frantic search of the glove compartment yielded nothing but useless documents. No weapon, not even a proper flashlight beyond his phone's weak beam. And the phone remained inert, a useless brick. Just Elias, the car, and the perpetual traveler. He resolved to pass again, swinging wide into the opposing lane, maximizing the distance. As he drew parallel, he craned his neck, leaning across the passenger seat, one hand clamped on the wheel, desperate for a facial feature, a clue, a sliver of pale cheek, perhaps the curve of an ear, glimpses too fleeting, too oblique. The head remained downturned, angled forward, a posture of deliberate avoidance. Drive, just drive. Ignore him, a hallucination, a stress-induced mirage. Keep moving until civilization reappeared, a gas station glow, a diner's welcoming light. People. He'd find people, help. He'd recount the madness. Maybe they'd return with him. Maybe they'd see it too. Or maybe they wouldn't, confirming his sanity's departure. But at least he wouldn't be alone in the knowing. The miles bled together, each one an agony of anticipation. The darkness felt suffocating. He flicked on the interior light momentarily, catching his reflection, wide, haunted eyes, sweat-sheened brow. He plunged back into darkness, focusing fiercely on the road. Another 10 minutes, there, ahead, shoulder, same posture. Elias slammed a fist onto the steering wheel, a raw "come on," tearing from his throat, echoing his fraying nerves. Anger now laced the fear. His legs trembled uncontrollably. He floored the accelerator, rocketing past without a sideways glance, heart pounding, breath sawing in his chest. 60 miles per hour now. Speed seemed irrelevant. The apparition manifested regardless. And again, after another stretch of tense monotony, it was there, waiting. Elias gripped the wheel until his knuckles ached. No slowing this time. He rolled down the window completely as he approached and screamed into the rushing wind, "Who the hell are you?" His voice cracked, raw and desperate. The wind snatched the words away. The figure offered no reply, no pause, no deviation. The cycle continued. Every few minutes, the phantom reappeared, precise, unchanging. Clothes, posture, pace, immutable. A loop stitched into the fabric of the night. Stopping to wait for dawn felt like surrender, hours trapped in proximity to the unknown. Fleeing into the lightless fields seemed equally perilous. The radio remained a torrent of static. The phone, a dead weight. Isolation, absolute. He experimented, driving back and forth several times. Forward until the figure appeared. U-turn. Back until it manifested again. Always ahead. always walking in his current direction of travel, always indifferent. An hour dissolved in this frantic ballet. Exhaustion gnawed at him. Shoulders screamed with tension, eyes burned from staring into the oppressive dark. His heart maintained its frantic rhythm. His mouth felt like parchment. He sipped warm, stale water from a bottle, meager comfort. One last attempt. He pulled over, climbed out, phone flashlight cutting a nervous beam. The figure shuffled onward, 30 feet ahead. Elias advanced slowly, light playing over the brown jacket, the dust motes dancing on the shoulders, faint stains on the trousers. He strained his ears, only the faintest scuff of shoe leather on gravel. Closer now, heart hammering against his ribs. He raised the light, darted sideways, a quick flanking maneuver. A flash of cheek, an eye, brown perhaps, startlingly normal. But in that same instant, a smooth, instantaneous shift, and the face was gone again. He stumbled, catching himself. The figure walked on. He lunged, hand outstretched, aiming for the shoulder. Fabric brushed his fingertips, coarse, real. But as his hand closed, it grasped only air. The figure seemed to glide forward, just beyond his reach. He tried again, a desperate grab, stumbling forward into emptiness. Panic clenched his chest, stealing his breath. He turned, sprinted back to the car, slammed and locked the door. Glanced in the mirror, nothing. Looked forward, there, ahead, walking. Defeated, trapped, body screaming fatigue, mind fractured by the impossible. He pressed the accelerator, aiming toward the figure one last time. As he neared, he swerved left, passing wide. The figure held its course on the shoulder. Elias passed and kept going. For the next hour, he drove mechanically. The figure appeared. He passed, appeared, sus passed. He ceased looking, focusing instead on the hypnotic repetition of the white lines, the speedometer's needle, the vibration of the wheel. Forward, just forward, hoping for rupture, for change. Then, subtly at first, a dilution of the blackness. The eastern horizon softened, bled into bruised purple, then faint gray. Dawn approached, tentative, hesitant, and with its approach, the apparitions ceased. Elias scanned the shoulder ahead, his breath held, empty. The man was gone, dissolved with the receding night. He drove on, propelled by adrenaline's dregs, until a structure emerged from the growing light, a small, isolated building, perhaps a derelict gas station. He aimed for it, hands trembling violently now. He pulled up as the first rays of sun breached the horizon, painting the desolate landscape in pale gold. The oppressive weight of the night lifted. He stumbled out, legs stiff, body utterly drained. The place was dilapidated, but possessed a functioning payphone inside. He called a friend, mumbled a request for rescue, offered no details. Then he waited by his car, scanning the now empty road, the quiet fields. The figure did not return. Who or what it had been remained an unanswerable question, a scar etched onto his memory of that night. He didn't crave answers anymore, only the profound relief of the ordeal's end and the silent vow to never again travel that haunted stretch of highway alone after dark. The world blinked blacked out. One moment, lamplight pooled on the pages of Alara's book. The next, an absolute ink-black void consumed the room. It wasn't merely dark, it was a suffocation. But worse, far worse, was the silence that crashed down in the power's wake. A profound stillness so heavy it felt physical, pressing on her eardrums. And through that crushing quiet, it came, the distinct, soft groan of a floorboard yielding to weight somewhere on the upper level. Unmistakable, alien. Self-reliance had always been Ilara's shield. The solitude of her small suburban house, nestled amongst sleeping neighbors, had been a comfort, a space defined solely by her own rhythms. The freedom was its own reward. Tonight, though, frozen in the lightless heart of her living room, the silence amplifying her own frantic pulse, she'd have bartered that cherished independence for any other heartbeat in the house. A dog, a cat, even an unwelcome guest. Anything but this terrifying unknown. The day itself had offered no premonition, unfolding with unremarkable rhythm. Work, the fluorescent hum of the grocery store, then home, the promise of a quiet evening cocooned indoors. A severe thunderstorm warning had scrolled across the news screen, but Ilara, veteran of countless summer squalls, had paid it little mind. As wind began to keen around the eaves and rain spat against the glass, she'd curled deeper into the sofa, the tempest outside heightening the sense of snug refuge within. The first thunderclap, a sudden celestial violence, startled a laugh from her. Just weather. Then the lights stuttered, flickered a desperate Morse code, and surrendered. She sat suspended in the abrupt blackness, waiting for vision to bloom in the absence of light. Outside, the storm seemed to inhale, then exhale with renewed ferocity, its gale-force breath rattling the window panes like skeletal fingers. Her hand scrabbled across the coffee table, finding the cool metal of her phone. Cursing softly, she thumbed it alive, the screen flaring weakly, battery icon a sliver of desperate red. Of course, neglected. Using that meager glow, a tiny island in the oceanic dark, she navigated towards the kitchen, thoughts fixed on candles, on reclaiming some small measure of light. It was then the sound repeated, that specific pressured creak from overhead. Ilara froze mid-step, her heart leaping a frantic bird against her ribs. The house settling, her rational mind insisted, old timbers protesting the storm, a desperate, flimsy lie. That sound bore intent. It carried the undeniable signature of a footstep. Someone else occupied her home. Panic, cold and sharp, threatened to fissure her composure. She fought it back, forcing shallow breaths. Think, plan. The phone, a dying star in her palm, offered no lifeline. The portable charger's location was lost somewhere in the domestic geography, now rendered hostile by darkness. Calling 911 felt impossible. Her gaze snagged on the knife block, blades catching some infinitesimal light, gleaming like predatory teeth. Arm herself? Confrontation sent a wave of nausea through her, liquefying her resolve. No. Evasion. Disappearance. Another creak, closer to the stairs this time, followed by the faint but distinct scrape of a door swinging open. They were moving, exploring the upper floor, no pretense of stealth now. Did the storm's symphony grant them cover? Or did they already know she was down here, listening, trapped in the suffocating dark? Movement was imperative. The kitchen, too exposed. Silently, a wraith in her own home, Ilara drifted towards the hallway closet. Small, yes, crammed with the ghosts of seasons past, coats, boots, forgotten scarves, but possessed of a lock. She slipped inside, pulling the door flush with the frame, the click of the lock echoing unnaturally loud in the confined space. She pressed herself back into the musty darkness, inhaling the strangely grounding scent of wool and leather, remnants of a normalcy that felt worlds away. Ears straining, she listened, filtering the rain's drumming tattoo against the roof, seeking any sound from within. Footfalls descended the stairs, slow, measured, each step a hammer blow against her fragile calm, her breath hitched. Downstairs, she burrowed deeper into a hanging coats, a thick sleeve brushing her cheek, triggering a desperate need to sneeze that she ruthlessly suppressed. The steps reached the landing, paused. A presence lingered just beyond the thin wood. Then a voice, low, rough-textured, undeniably male, slid into the silence. "I know you're in here somewhere." Raw terror, electric and paralyzing, surged through Ilara. Not random, then. Targeted. Why? Her thoughts fragmented, chasing frantic, terrifying possibilities. The steps resumed, drawing nearer to her hiding place. The soft shush of hands brushing walls, the click of other doors being opened, searched. Sweat slicked her palms as she clutched the near-lifeless phone. Dare she risk a call? The merest electronic chirp would betray her. A floorboard groaned directly outside the closet. Ilara ceased breathing, every muscle locked. The doorknob rattled, a metallic tremor against the wood. Come out, the voice crooned, a grotesque playground taunt, making it harder. She bit down hard on her lower lip, tasting blood, stifling a whimper. The knob twisted again, harder, testing the lock's integrity. Then, abrupt silence. An eternity stretched within that quiet moment. Had he moved on, given up the search in this specific spot? Ilara risked a shallow intake of air. Without warning, a violent impact slammed against the door, the frame shuddering violently. A startled cry escaped her lips before she could clamp down on it. "There you are," the voice resonated, thick with grim satisfaction. Another blow landed, wood splintering, protesting its violation. Panic, paradoxically, forged clarity. Staying was death. Flight or fight was the only path. As the door groaned under a third assault, she braced herself, muscles coiling. The instant it yielded, she would explode outwards, push past, run. Her only chance. The next impact sent shards of wood skittering into the closet's darkness. Ilara tensed, poised for the breach. But before the door could fully disintegrate, a new sound sliced through the storm's roar and the splintering wood. Sirens. Distant at first, but rapidly swelling, painting the hallway outside in pulses of refracted blue and red light filtering under the door. The attack ceased instantly. A muffled curse, then the sound of hurried footsteps retreating towards the rear of the house. Relief washed over Ilara, so potent it buckled her knees. She sagged against the coats, trembling, not safe yet. Was it a trick? A feint to draw her out? With hands that shook uncontrollably, she fumbled with the lock, finally clicking it open. She stumbled out into the hallway, the air thick with the scent of fractured pine. The house felt cavernous and silent now, save for the receding storm and the approaching wail of the sirens. Every shadow seemed to writhe with potential menace. On legs of jelly, she propelled herself towards the front door. Just as her fingers closed around the cold metal of the knob, the world outside erupted in flashing color. She wrenched the door open, nearly collapsing onto the rain-slicked porch. 2 police cruisers angled onto her curb, officers emerging, beams from their heavy flashlights cutting cones through the damp air. "Help!" Ilara choked out, her voice a ragged whisper. "Someone in my house." The ensuing hours dissolved into a procedural haze. Officers swept through the house, flashlights probing every corner, then fanned out into the drenched yard. No trace of the intruder. They documented her fragmented account, the questions circling, enemies, grudges, reasons anyone might target her. Ilara could only shake her head, adrift in bewildered fear. It was an officer methodically inspecting the backyard who found the entry point, a basement window, skillfully forced, then carefully nudged back into place. He'd been inside long before the lights died, a patient predator waiting in the bowels of her home. Muddy footprints marked the basement floor and trailed faintly upstairs, but the night's deluge had scoured the earth clean outside. He had melted back into the storm. Adrenaline ebbed, leaving behind a profound, bone-deep exhaustion. The police offered a hotel, a sterile refuge, but the thought felt like surrender. This was her space, violated but still hers. She refused to be driven out. So Ilara stayed, though not truly alone. A patrol car remained a sentinel at the curb throughout the night, its presence a thin balm. Sleep was elusive, punctuated by the house's nocturnal groans, each one a potential echo of the intruder's tread. Dawn arrived with a deceptive cleanness, the storm replaced by a sky washed pale blue. The world outside seemed scrubbed new. Inside, however, the splintered closet door and the drying mud stains on the upstairs carpet served as brutal anchors to the night's reality. Not a dream. The police investigation would continue, they assured her, but offered little hope. Such targeted invasions were rare, statistically anomalous, yet undeniably real. Upgrade security, be vigilant, they advised. But vigilance felt like a flimsy shield against a faceless threat. How could sanctuary ever feel absolute again? In the days that followed, Ilara existed in a state of heightened alert. Shadows lunged, familiar sounds became portents. New deadbolts clicked into place, cameras sprouted like metallic fungi under the eaves, motion sensors guarded the perimeter. Her home, once a haven, transformed into a defended outpost, yet the core of fear remained. The questions echoed in the quiet moments. Who? Why? The absence of answers festered, perhaps more corrosive than the terror itself. Gradually, the sharp edges of fear began to dull. Life's routines reasserted themselves, overlaying the trauma like new soil. Yet Ilara knew a fundamental shift had occurred. The easy confidence, the unthinking sense of safety, gone, replaced by a constant, low-level hum of awareness. But alongside the fear, something unexpected took root: resilience. She had navigated the darkest passage of her fear and emerged, shaken but intact. A strength she hadn't known she possessed now resided within her. Sitting now in her living room, the same space where the darkness first fell, Ilara understood. The violation had scarred her, yes, but not irrevocably broken her. The shadows might forever murmur secrets, but the darkness itself no longer held dominion. She had survived, and whatever waited in future shadows, she would face it. My 10th floor sanctuary, I'd called it, chosen precisely for the elevation, a vertical moat against the city's casual intrusions. The panorama was a glittering tapestry I refused to obscure, leaving the curtains drawn back each night to commune with the constellations of urban light. Safety, I'd thought, was measured in altitude. Then came the distortion at the edge of sight, a presence coalescing in the void beyond my window. Initially, I painted it with the brush of fatigue, a mere phantasm born of shadow play. I was mistaken. What lingers out there is no trick of the eye. It possesses substance, intention, and it craves entry. 6 months have dissolved since I first turned the key. The building pierces the sky from a perpetually churning neighborhood, a concrete titan amidst the urban sprawl. Below, the streets thrum with a ceaseless symphony of sirens and horns, sounds that have always been my city dweller's lullaby. My apartment is a modest affair, a single bedroom, a compact living space, a galley kitchen barely wide enough to turn in, and a slender balcony accessed through sliding glass. Adjacent to this door, a vast pane of window mirrors the city's nocturnal glow. Heavy drapery felt like suffocation, so I opted for sheers, diaphanous veils that barely muted the external luminescence, casting kinetic hieroglyphs upon my walls, a shifting calligraphy that until recently brought a peculiar solace. It began weeks ago, fabricating a late meal after shedding the skin of my workday, the same starched collar and tailored trousers. Weariness clung to me like damp wool. The kitchen fluorescents hummed overhead, leaving the living room steeped in twilight. I deposited my plate on the low table, sinking into the couch's embrace. That's when it happened. A flicker, a barely registered disturbance at the periphery. My head snapped up, eyes raking the obsidian canvas outside. My building stares across an asphalt chasm at its twin tower, the gulf too wide for any terrestrial acrobatics. A faint waver caught my attention, but I swiftly labeled it a reflection, the fleeting ghost of passing headlights. With a shrug, I returned to my cooling dinner. The silence punctuated only by the refrigerator's low thrum and the distant circulatory rush of traffic. Later, while performing the nightly ritual of brushing my teeth, a distinct tap resonated, faint as a moth's wing against the glass. Emerging into the living room, still illuminated, I surveyed the familiar panorama, towers ablaze, ribbons of traffic flowing below. No errant bird, no wind-flung debris offered explanation. Architectural settling, perhaps, or the sigh of the building in the night breeze. Dismissing it, I extinguished the lights and sought my bed. The following evening found me engrossed in a document on my laptop, cocooned on the couch. The curtains remained open, the balcony door secured. Around the cusp of midnight, a shadow traversed the glass. Not the swift blur of something falling or passing, but a slow, deliberate glide. A cold fist clenched around my heart. I rose, crossed the room, peered into the darkness. Nothing. The balcony stood vacant. The air hung motionless, refusing even to stir the thin fabric of the shears. I lingered, scanning the void, searching for absent cables, forgotten ropes from window washers. A strained chuckle escaped me. Overworked, sleep-deprived, that had to be it. Several nights later, thirst pulled me from sleep near 2 in the morning. Padding into the living room for water, I stopped dead. Silhouetted against the window, stark and impossibly tall, was a dark contour. My pulse detonated in my ears. It resembled a figure, featureless yet undeniably present. Then it moved. A lateral slide towards the balcony door, a pause. The glass I held slipped from nerveless fingers, landing soundlessly on the carpet, splashing cool water over my ankles. A primal urge screamed at me to lunge, to rip the curtains shut, but the sheer wrongness of the shape held me paralyzed. It wasn't on the balcony. It seemed suspended beyond it, adhering to the glass, impossibly afloat in the chasm. My hand began to tremble violently. A knot tightened low in my stomach, stealing my breath. Rooted into the spot, I watched. Though I could discern no eyes, the weight of its scrutiny felt palpable. The shape lingered, an ink blot against the city's glow, before drifting languidly to the right and dissolving into the night. I threw every switch, flooding the apartment with artificial daylight. The remainder of the night was spent huddled on the couch, the television murmuring on mute, fighting the gravitational pull of sleep. Dawn eventually bled through the glass, revealing a city washed bright and ordinary. In the ensuing week, dusk became synonymous with dread. Initially, I waged a campaign of deliberate ignorance, immersing myself in work, emails, calls, anything to avoid the siren call of the window. Stress, I chanted inwardly, hallucination. Yet a cold clarity resided beneath the fear. I began drawing the flimsy curtains, but they were permeable barriers, allowing the city's aura to seep through, often, I swore, outlining a familiar silhouette against the fabric. One night, the gentle tapping returned. I stood frozen, staring at the veiled window. I didn't move to look. Go away, I breathed into the charged air, the whisper barely audible. The tapping ceased. Then the violation escalated. I was drifting on the couch, having forgone the bedroom entirely, phone clutched loosely. The television screen was blank, the lamps dark. A loud creak ripped through the quiet, the sound of pressure against yielding glass. I bolted upright, heart hammering against my ribs. My gaze flew to the window. The shears hung slightly parted, a narrow stage for the horror unfolding. A hand was pressed flat against the pane. It appeared translucent, nebulous, like sculpted mist or skin woven from fog. The faint outline of splayed fingers was terrifyingly clear. My entire body seized. A prickling sensation crawled across my scalp as cold sweat bloomed on my forehead. A scream lodged itself in my throat, unvoiced. The hand remained, an intimate, unwanted touch upon the glass. Then it began to ascend, leaving faint, glistening trails of some unidentifiable residue that shimmered wetly in the stray gleam of streetlights. I scrambled off the couch, fumbled for the nearest lamp switch, snatched a heavy monograph from the bookshelf. My first instinct was violence, to hurl the book, to strike the glass. But a more profound terror stayed my hand, the fear of shattering the fragile barrier, of granting it passage. I stood, breath ragged, feet unsteady on the floor. After an eternity, the hand withdrew, the shape it belonged to melting back into the encompassing darkness. I waited, eyes locked on the window, for 10 minutes that stretched into an hour. Finally, forcing a semblance of calm, I approached the glass. Leaning close, I saw the condensation-slicked surface was marred by streaks, the drag marks of fingers. They were unnaturally long, slender, the proportions subtly alien. My mouth was sandpaper. This is impossible. My mind screamed, yet the evidence glistened before me. The next day was a torment of replays, the spectral hand imprinted on my consciousness. The police? Useless. Building security? What could they do about something that hovered 10 stories up without support, possessing appendages like smoke? No ledge existed. No rational explanation presented itself. If this was a prelude to a break-in, why the ethereal theatrics? A fragile calm descended for a couple of days. No further visitations. I attempted to stitch the frayed edges of normalcy back together. Work, takeout, television, fitful sleep. But with each sunset, an insidious unease crept back in. I left lamps burning through the night, my eyes constantly flicking towards the balcony door, anticipating movement. The familiar city sounds seemed muffled now, distant, as if the very air within my apartment had grown heavy, watchful. I was no longer alone in the silence. Defeated, I sought refuge in opacity. A trip to a home furnishing store yielded thick, light-devouring curtains. I wrestled a new rod into place, hung the heavy fabric. If sight was the conduit, perhaps blindness was the shield. That night, I sealed myself behind the velvet wall. Laptop balanced, I tried to lose myself in a video stream. Around midnight, a new sound emerged, the soft rasp of fabric scraping against glass, subtle, intimate like a sleeve, brushing the pain from the outside. Nausea churned as I stared at the inert curtains. Then I saw it, infinitesimal tremors at the edges, as if the material were being gently plucked or pulled from beyond. A dull throb started behind my eyes. Rising, I approached the window, placed my palm flat against the heavy curtain. A faint, definite pressure met my touch, pushing back. I snatched my hand away as if burned, stumbling backward. My heart galloped. Breath came in shallow gasps. Trapped. Nowhere to run within my own walls, suspended high above the sleeping city. I retreated, locking myself in the bedroom, flooding the small space with music, a desperate attempt to drown out the silence and whatever lay beyond it. Sleep was a shallow, broken thing, haunted by visions of that translucent hand probing the thick curtain, seeking ingress. The following morning, I fled to the sterile predictability of spreadsheets and emails, but focus remained elusive. My thoughts kept circling back to that subtle pressure, that unnerving sense of weight against the fabric, insistent, yet somehow lacking solidity. My friend Leo suggested drinks after work. I agreed instantly, craving distraction. He noticed my frayed edges, attributing it to work stress. Over beers in a noisy bar, the urge to confess, to share the impossible burden, warred with the certainty of disbelief. How could I articulate the spectral siege? I kept silent. Returning late, buoyed by a mild alcoholic haze, I harbored a foolish hope that numbness might grant me peace. I illuminated every corner, checked the curtain's seal, and collapsed onto the couch. A high-pitched screech tore me from unconsciousness. The wall clock glowed 3:17 a.m. The sound emanated from the window, sharp, grating, like fingernails clawing at glass. The fine hairs on my arms prickled upright. My pulse hammered a frantic rhythm in my throat. Fumbling, I switched on the lamp. Silence fell instantly. Panic spiraled. Who could I call at this hour? My legs felt like water as I forced myself to stand, creeping towards the window. The heavy curtains hung undisturbed. Trembling, I reached out, grasped the edge of the fabric, and pulled it back just an inch, creating a tiny aperture. My breath hitched. It was there, pressed so intimately against the glass, I could perceive the faint outline of a head, shoulders. The city lights behind it etched a thin, shimmering corona around the form, but the shape itself was a study in grayish transparency, seeming to waver and pulse, suspended in the air. I let the curtain drop back into place. A band tightened around my chest. Its motives remained terrifyingly opaque, its persistence absolute. I backed away, fighting for control over my ragged breathing. My mouth was arid, fingers quivering. This silence, this secrecy was unsustainable. Moving felt like admitting defeat, abandoning my home to this thing. But the terror was becoming corrosive. I needed answers, some rational anchor, a neighbor's bizarre projection, an elaborate drone, a trick of refraction. Yet deep down, the memory of that hand, that impossible touch, refuted all logical dismissal. Retrieving a heavy flashlight from a kitchen drawer, I strode back to the window. With a decisive tug, I swept the curtains wide, simultaneously bathing the glass in the flashlight's harsh beam. The shape evaporated, instantly gone. I swung the light across the exterior void, searching frantically for wires, platforms, anything. Only empty air and the distant, indifferent windows of the opposing tower met my gaze. After several seconds, baffled and more unnerved than ever, I closed the curtains, extinguished the beam. The following morning, I contacted the building manager, reporting strange nocturnal noises, suggesting someone might be tampering with my balcony. His response was chillingly casual. Yes, I was the third tenant to mention weird stuff recently. Others on upper floors had complained of flickering shadows, unsettling sights. He offered no details, just a vague assurance that maintenance had inspected window fittings and found nothing amiss. A shrug transmitted through the phone line. My next step, technology. A small security camera positioned on a table, lens aimed squarely at the window. I set it to record continuously overnight. That first night, I left the heavy curtains open, a desperate gamble to capture objective proof. Sleep was fragmented, punctuated by the faint, insistent tapping against the glass. In the morning, I reviewed the footage eagerly. It showed my living room reflected in the dark pane. Then, around 2 a.m., coinciding with the time I'd heard the tapping, the image dissolved into a brief blizzard of static before resolving. Nothing visible outside, just the deep black of the urban night. This pattern repeated over subsequent nights, regardless of camera angle or ambient light. Whenever a noise occurred, whenever I sensed its presence, the recording momentarily failed, obscured by digital snow. It knew. Somehow, it knew, and it refused to be documented. A profound sense of entrapment settled over me. My anxiety became a constant hum beneath the surface of everyday life, small sounds making me jump. 2 nights ago, the sound wasn't a tap or a scrape. It was a sharp, distinct snap. I scrambled to the window. Near the frame, a thin spiderweb fracture marred the glass, and behind it, pressed close, was the shape. The silhouette of that spectral hand was visible again, exerting pressure. My heart felt ready to burst. Phone in hand, thumb hovering over the emergency number, I hesitated. They'd arrive too late. It would vanish, leaving me with a cracked window and a story no one would believe. I watched, horrified, as the tiny crack visibly lengthened by a fraction of an inch under the unseen force. Then abruptly, the shape receded. The pressure eased. The glass fell silent. Trembling, I approached, laying a hand near the nascent fracture. The pain felt unnaturally cold. The shape lingered for another moment, a deeper shadow in the darkness, before fading completely. Now I sit bathed in the artificial glare of every lamp I own, the heavy curtains drawn tight. Sleep has become a forgotten luxury. A repair service is scheduled for the morning to address the crack, but the fear gnaws relentlessly. What happens when it pushes again? What happens if the glass gives way? The thought twists my insides. How did my sanctuary become this prison? I have nowhere else to go. A night or two at Leo's? The thought offers fleeting comforts, quickly eclipsed by the fear of leaving my apartment vulnerable, unoccupied. So what might it do then? So I remain, typing these words into the sterile glow of the screen, my eyes darting constantly towards the veiled window. I feel its presence out there, a patient, watchful entity waiting for its moment. My pulse refuses to steady. Every creak of the building is an electric shock. Safety feels like a distant memory. When I dare to close my eyes, the translucent hand is there, imprinted on the darkness. Is it reaching even now? Pressing, testing the newly weakened glass? Will the next time I look reveal not a curtained window, but an open, gaping maw into the night?